Okay, well, today I'm with my good friend Steve Armstrong. And before I ask Steve some questions about what's going on in his business, I want to just tell you a little bit about Steve. So, Steve and I have known each other in different ways over a number of years. And I first ran into Steve when he was the regional director for one of Canada's largest nonprofits. He's certainly a leadership expert. And one of the things I really admire about Steve is he also is pretty quick to pivot and to find new ways to help people. So welcome, Steve.
Thanks, Hugh. Thanks for that. Great. I feel good about myself now. A little intro.
Well, we're done. That's all.
That's it. Oh, boy. I got stroked and I can go home now. Yeah, thanks for that.
So why don't you just tell us a little bit about the business you're in, Steve? Like what kind of work do you do with different organizations?
Yeah. So after we worked together when I had a job, I left that about 7 years ago now, if you can imagine. Holy cannoli. And that first year was a bit of a transition, but as I moved into hopefully my last working phase of my life, I started up a speaking business and a consultancy. And my area has been around building better leaders, and building healthier organizations too. And most of the things that I bumped into in my life is that organizations are full of really smart people, but like most families, there's an underlying level of dysfunction. And I work with super smart people, engineers, IT folk, highly professional people that are brilliant, but sometimes they've never learned how to be a good boss and how to lead a good team.
And I know you've had some huge results from your work within organizations where you've essentially from my interpretation is really rescued organizations and helped repair a lot of relationships that could have gone south. So Steve, COVID's hit all of us. I'm not sure. I think we're in like month number 6 or 7. It's almost strange that it's becoming normal. So what's been the impact on you? Like you're a people person. So and a lot of your activities in business have to do with helping people face to face. So what's been the impact?
Well, there's been a direct financial impact. On the speaking side, I probably saw $50,000-$60,000 disappear in a week. I'm not alone in that. I think most people in the speaking business is some way more than that. Luckily, I have like a 50-50 split, I suppose. Best to describe it on the speaking and the consultancy. And although the consultancy went into a bit of a hiatus and some hibernation while people were figuring out what the heck was going on, it's starting to pick up a wee bit. But what I invested in early on was giving it away. Giving as much away as I could because I knew people were in trouble and they weren't able to think or find space. And so I hosted, Hugh, I have no idea now, probably a dozen webinars in the first couple of months around how to lead in a crisis and how to prepare your organization for the pandemic phase, and then also on how to start thinking about coming out the other side whenever that's going to happen for us.
Nice. And it's probably, I'm sure, been well received. How about so why don't you tell us some of the ideas you've got? So how do, eventually this is all going to, end. What are you recommending? Like what should organizations be thinking about as we go through this and when we don't really know when it's going to end, but it will end? What should we be thinking about?
It's interesting you say that because we're now sort of around the 21st or 2nd of September. So 8 months in. 6 or 7 or 8 months, who knows, it's a blur. But I actually, this morning I did a little Google search, just coincidental to this conversation, and I saw that most people were having conversations. The last things I saw about people communicating with their employees was dated in March and April. And it makes me wonder, like officially, like the official letter from the CEO. So it makes me really wonder what the heck people are doing out there. So what I've been telling people is stop emailing people and get them on Zoom, get them on whatever platform it is, or pick up the phone. And what people really need to do is just start listening and talking as a human being to their employees and their teams, no matter how big a company it is.
Right.
And because people need comfort. And we as human beings are actually quite good about being tolerant when things are in crisis, but this crisis has lasted for months. And people are on edge. You can hear it in how people are responding to public health officers and political leaders. People are frustrated and angry. So what we really need to do, the first thing we need to do is stop, slow down, reset by talking to people, not with email, but online as best we can, and by phone, and make sure everyone is okay and that they know that things are going to be different, but it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And,
Nice.
and then the next part after that is what I've been coaching the people that care to listen to me, which is mostly outside of this house. I don't know why. Inside the house, I'm not an expert, but outside I seem to be.
Right.
Is okay, so start resetting your company now. It's not going to be the same. It can't be the same as what it was in January and December of last year. So what are you going to be when you grow up as we come out of this COVID? Are you going to be a different company? Are you going to be structured differently? How are you going to do business? How are you going to behave with each other differently than you were before?
Yeah.
Because I think people's tolerance is for stupidity and dumb stuff and bureaucracy is pretty finite.
Right.
Yeah. So how are you going to move through that?
Yeah, that's really good. And, at BlogWorks, my company, we've been looking at, so obviously some of the things like cost cutting, but also how can we do things better? We're noticing, or I'm noticing that certainly, as you mentioned, right, that all those speaking engagements or attending conferences as a delegate, a lot of those things that occupied a lot of time are now gone. And so I've been looking at, well, what am I using my time for instead? And one of the things I've been trying to do is just get better at our practices. So get better at our systems, get better at the way that we communicate. And, as an investment. And I think in your case, Steve, like your genius is helping people with those relationships. I think we're going to find that people can be, there's a need to invest in people's sanity, like in their stress levels and managing these anxieties that are probably going to start to show up in really unwanted ways. Because the longer this goes on, the harder it's going to be, I think, for people to consider it normal.
Well, my background too is disaster, emergency response, disaster management, long-term post-disaster recovery. And there's so many things that I'm drawing from that experience, from forest fires and floods and tsunamis and earthquakes and whatever, hurricanes, to this. And the number one thing is like people's capacity to absorb is finite, and they're right up to here. If we were in water, we'd be up to right to here, right? You've got kids at school. The impact generally on women, moms and women, is disproportionate to men because a lot of them are work in lower income. People's are making hard choices. My wife's physiotherapist has to leave her job because of COVID, because she's got 2 immunocompromised kids at home and elderly parents at home.
Oh, wow.
So you're taking 80, no, she's well paid, but you're taking $80,000 to $100,000 a year out of a family income. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. So as leaders, then what do we got to do? We have to go listen to that. In this case, it's a husband, but it could be a wife, just the same as spouse, and make sure that we understand how vulnerable that person is as we're making other decisions. And we have to listen. Yeah. I think listening is what we have to, first off, we have to communicate and talk and tell people what's going on, but we have to stop and listen.
Yeah. And just practice doing that better every day. It used to be, I'm guilty of this. I'd be a really good listener when the stakes were high, and I would just sort of be lazy for the rest of the day or the rest of the week. I think we need to be practicing all the time. It's a muscle, and the more that we exercise that muscle, the better it gets naturally, in all circumstances, right?
Well, most people, I get hell from my wife all the time, because if we're at a social event and somebody talks over my sentence or won't let me finish what I'm saying, I just sit back and stop talking.
Right.
So the analogy to that is if I'm in the workplace and I have a sense, and I bumped into that at work in my previous work, things caught up with me. I was really struggling personally with mental health issues, I was supposed. And I tried to talk about it, but nobody listened. I felt
Right.
nobody was listening, and nobody was asking the next question to allow me to speak more about it. And we need, as leaders, really need to slow down. And like I often tell people when I have a chance to talk to them about it is one is always pause if somebody tells you something or asks you as a boss a question. Pause and consider for a couple of seconds. Even if you know the answer, you pretend like you're considering what the person said.
Yeah.
Make the person feel cared for. Ask a question. If somebody answers, don't jump right in at the end. Be like the border guards when you cross the border, right? They ask you what you did, and then they never say anything. And all of a sudden, you or the person you're traveling with is talking about all the contraband you got in your bag and all the illegal, illicit things you did in Vegas.
That's why you go like, okay, I'll tell you everything.
Stop talking. So there's a couple little things we can do as people on the listening side, I think is very important. Because if people stop talking to us, we're screwed as bosses because we don't know what's really going on anymore.
So good. Steve, how can people learn more about you and the work you're doing?
Well, anybody at any time can go to my website at Stephen Armstrong, that's STEVEN Armstrong.ca, and there's lots there going on, and you can learn about my consultancy and my speaking. There's a spot to download a copy of my book and learn a little about me. Yeah, so there's lots going on there.
Okay, we'll be sure to put a link in this recording as well.
Yeah, nice.
All right, great. It's great to catch up with you again, Steve.
Oh my gosh, Steve, it's always a great pleasure. You make me happy just seeing you and talking to you.
Okay, we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, you bet.
Cheers.
Bye, you.
See ya.